Everyone thinks Utah is the center of Mormonism. But what if it isn't the future? What if the next spiritual capital, the next Zion, is rising right now in a country you would never expect? For almost 2 full centuries, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has been shaped by one nation. Its theology matured in America. Its culture grew in America. Its power lived in America. But Mormonism is no longer an American faith. It is a multilingual, multi-ethnic, multinational religion whose growth, energy, and future are shifting away from the mountains of Utah and toward nations whose cultures, families, and spiritual hunger mirror the earliest days of the Restoration. Tonight, we go searching for the next Mormon nation, the place where the faith's future will gather, grow, and transform. Not politically, but spiritually. Chapter 1. What the next Mormon nation actually means. When we talk about the next Mormon nation, we are not imagining a political kingdom, an LDS monarchy, or a government ruled by prophets. The phrase means something far older and far more powerful than any modern border. It means a spiritual homeland, a place where the faith gathers its strength, a cultural center of gravity, a demographic heart beating louder than anywhere else on earth. Because in Latter-day Saint thought, Zion is never defined by lines on a map. Zion is a people, a covenant community, a body moving together through history. Zion lives wherever the saints gather in enough numbers, with enough faith, to shape a new way of life. And across Mormon history, Zion has migrated like a pilgrim searching for rest. First in the burning spiritual fire of New York's burned-over district. Then in the fragile experimental villages of Ohio. Then in the prophetic dreams and violent persecutions of Missouri. Then in the temporary refuge of Nauvoo, Illinois. Then across frozen rivers and endless plains to a desert no one else wanted, Utah. Every generation, the center of Mormonism has shifted westward, upward, outward. Each time it moved, it left behind a chapter of faith and built a new one. But now, the church is not a frontier movement anymore. It is a global faith. The population is exploding outside the United States. Institutions are stabilizing. Cultures are maturing. Entire nations are rising with Latter-day Saint identity in their schools, their families, their political life, their cities. And so a new question is emerging quietly inside church leadership, loudly among church scholars, and instinctively among members across the world. Where will the next spiritual heart of Mormonism be built? Which nation has the devotion, the youth, the growth, the cultural alignment, the resilience, and the spiritual hunger to become the faith's new demographic home base? Which land will become the place future Latter-day Saints look to and say, that is where the center shifted. That is where Zion gathered next. This is the hunt for the next Mormon nation, not a kingdom, not a takeover, but a spiritual center rising somewhere unexpected on the world map. Chapter 2. The criteria for a future Mormon powerhouse. A future Mormon nation, a true spiritual center, cannot be predicted by membership statistics alone. Raw numbers tell you who joined, but the deeper question is, who stays, who leads, and who transforms the faith from the inside? A rising Mormon powerhouse must have spiritual staying power, the kind that survives trends, generations, and political storms. It begins with retention, not temporary excitement, not conversion spikes, but people who remain active for decades, raise families in the faith, and pass devotion to their children. Mormonism is a multi-generational religion. It only thrives where commitment becomes inheritance. It also requires governments that tolerate or quietly cooperate with the church's presence. Throughout LDS history, political hostility has destroyed entire settlements. But when a nation allows religious freedom, offers legal stability, or even sees the church as a partner in education, welfare, or moral values, Mormonism takes root and grows like a deep-rooted tree. Then comes family culture. Mormonism thrives in cultures where family is not a hobby or a lifestyle choice, but a sacred obligation. Nations where grandparents live close, where children are seen as blessings, where loyalty is ancestral. Because the LDS system missions, temples, callings is sustained by strong family networks. Next is youth. The church survives on the energy of young converts, young missionaries, young families, young leaders. Where the median age is low, Mormonism expands with astonishing speed. Where populations grow older and smaller, the faith slows. A future spiritual center also needs stable church infrastructure, temples that anchor devotion, stakes that expand leadership, seminaries and institutes that shape the rising generation, and training systems that produce confident local bishops and stake presidents. And then comes the final and perhaps most important criterion: local leadership that stops depending on American Mormonism. A true Mormon nation emerges only when it can guide the church in its own cultural voice. When converts become bishops, bishops become mission presidents, mission presidents become area authorities, and the faith reflects the local identity as much as the Utah one. When all these elements combine: high retention, family culture, youth demographics, stable governance, strong infrastructure, and confident national leadership, a new spiritual center emerges almost automatically. And here's the surprising reality: several nations right now meet that profile more strongly than Utah ever did. The next Mormon powerhouse will not look like pioneer America. It will look like a rising nation whose faith, culture, and people are ready to build Zion in a new language, a new landscape, and a new identity. Chapter 3. Latin America, the sleeping giant. When the restored church entered Latin America, it found something the early pioneers in Ohio and Missouri could only dream of: a population ready to receive the message in numbers that defied every expectation. From the moment missionaries stepped into the great cities and mountains of the continent, the faith spread with a velocity never seen in the English-speaking world. Mexico, Brazil, Chile, Peru. These were not small chapters in LDS history. They became the engine room of Mormonism's global rise. For decades, Latin America was the church's great demographic miracle. Where North American growth slowed, Latin America surged. Where Europe stabilized, Latin America accelerated. Entire stakes appeared, seemingly overnight. Missionary work in cities like São Paulo, Lima, and Mexico City produced the kind of numbers Utah leaders once called the harvest of prophecy. Today, Brazil and Mexico stand as the two largest Latter-day Saint populations outside the United States, forming a cultural and spiritual bloc larger than anything Joseph Smith or Brigham Young ever imagined. But raw growth came with real challenges. Retention was turbulent. Some stayed, some drifted, some never fully integrated. Massive urban poverty-strained families, making long-term activity difficult. Political instability, from shifting regimes to economic downturns, weakened congregational stability in many regions. And throughout the continent, Pentecostal Christianity became a fierce competitor, offering emotional worship styles and community networks that often overshadowed the more structured Mormon approach. For years, Latin America looked like a place where the church grew fast, but not deep. Until now, something is changing, especially in Brazil, the quiet giant of global Mormonism. A new generation of Brazilian Latter-day Saints is rising with confidence. Temples multiply, transforming the spiritual landscape. Local leaders fill callings once dominated by American expatriates, showing a maturity that earlier generations lacked. Congregations stabilize, becoming multi-decade communities instead of fragile new branches. Youth programs flourish, creating a pipeline of missionaries, teachers, and leaders who were born in the church rather than converted into it. Brazil is starting to feel less like a mission field and more like a self-sustaining spiritual engine, a place with enough devotion, enough youth, enough culture, and enough leadership to stand independently from Utah's gravitational pull. And that is the quiet truth. If a future Mormon nation must reflect the criteria of long-term stability, rising leadership, family culture, and an unshakable youth demographic, Brazil is no longer just participating in Mormonism. It is beginning to shape it. Latin America may have been the sleeping giant, but Brazil, with its temples, its youth, its leadership, its cultural depth, may be waking up as the continent's first true candidate for the next Mormon nation. Chapter 4. The Philippines, the Asian Zion. Mormonism in the Philippines is not an imported faith. It does not sit on the surface of the culture. It does not feel borrowed or foreign. It feels native, almost ancestral. Filipino spirituality is emotional, communal, sacrificial, family-centered, and resilient. It mirrors the spiritual DNA of early Latter-day Saints more closely than almost any modern nation, where early American saints built Zion with unity and sacrifice. Filipinos live those instincts every day in their families, in their faith practices, in their willingness to endure hardship with gratitude rather than bitterness. And then there is the nation's demographic reality. The Philippines is young, astonishingly young. A rising generation fills seminaries, institutes, and missions with a level of enthusiasm the global church sees only in very rare pockets of the world. These youth are not just attending. They are leading, teaching, volunteering, and building the future of the faith with an intensity that feels almost prophetic. Across the archipelago, temples rise in places once considered unreachable. Missions expand across islands that once saw only sporadic contact. Congregations mature and stabilize as convert families grow into multi-generation Latter-day Saint lineages. Filipino missionaries go everywhere, not just to local islands, but to Thailand, to Japan, to Korea, to Europe, even to Africa. And they go not as visitors or cultural outsiders, but as pioneers, bringing a warmth, humility, and emotional intelligence that opens doors many others cannot. If Brazil has the numbers, the Philippines has the soul. A depth of devotion that feels rooted in centuries of cultural reverence. A humility that strengthens congregations. A missionary fire that turns ordinary members into global ambassadors. Some church observers quietly predict that the Philippines could become the missionary factory of all Asia, the place that supplies the teachers, leaders, and spiritual energy needed to build Zion across the continent. Others go further. They believe the Philippines could evolve into the future spiritual capital of the region, a kind of Asian Salt Lake City, not politically, but symbolically, demographically, and spiritually. Either way, the Philippines is not just growing. It is rising. It is maturing. It is transforming into something larger than statistics can measure. It is a contender, a strong one, for the title of the next Mormon nation. Chapter 5. Nigeria. The unexpected contender. Nigeria is the plot twist no one saw, coming the surprise that rewrites the entire global narrative of Mormonism. Long before the church ever arrived officially, Nigerians were already waiting for it. In the 1960s and 1970s, independent congregations sprang up across the country. Men and women gathered in borrowed classrooms and open fields, reading photocopied pages from the Book of Mormon, organizing their own worship, and praying explicitly for missionaries to be sent from America. They built the roots of a faith they did not yet have. They established the desire before the institution. By the time official missionaries finally entered the country, Nigeria had already prepared a foundation more durable than anyone imagined. And when the church did arrive, the growth was not chaotic or shallow. It was fast, disciplined, and strikingly stable. Nigerian saints stay active. They attend, they serve, they teach, they raise children in the faith who become second-generation leaders. They produce missionaries in remarkable numbers, not hesitant volunteers, but bold, confident, spiritually grounded young men and women who bring an energy many mission presidents describe as unmatched. Their congregations do not depend on American cultural scaffolding. They are Nigerian in voice, Nigerian in rhythm, Nigerian in spiritual texture. This is crucial. The gospel thrives in Nigeria because it feels culturally compatible, not imported or imitated. And then there is the nation's greatest advantage. Nigeria is young, overwhelmingly young. Its median age is among the lowest in the world. Its population is soaring toward one of the largest on earth. Its cities are exploding with energy, ambition, and religious passion, conditions that have historically fueled the rise of Mormonism. Nigeria's religious culture is intense, communal, reverent, and resilient. It understands sacrifice. It understands spiritual warfare. It understands collective identity. These are all instincts that echo early Latter-day Saint culture far more closely than modern American Mormonism does. If Nigeria's trajectory continues, rising membership, strong retention, deep family culture, confident local leadership, it could become something unprecedented in LDS history, the first African nation to rival, and possibly surpass, the spiritual influence of Latin America and Asia. This is no longer speculation. Scholars are watching it. Mission presidents talk about it. Leaders acknowledge it privately. Members feel it in their wards and branches every Sunday. Nigeria is the contender no one predicted, and the contender everyone is watching now. Chapter 6. The Polynesian Exception. In Tonga, Samoa, and Fiji, Mormonism is not simply a faith, it is a landscape, a culture, a rhythm. On these islands, the church is woven into the air people breathe. It appears in the hymns sung by children, in the feasts prepared for visiting missionaries, in the way families gather, in the way communities organize their days. Here, the church is not something you join, it is something you are born into, raised inside, and carried by. Per capita, no place on earth is more Latter-day Saint than Polynesia. Entire villages look like miniature Zions, not metaphorically, but literally. A chapel at the center. Houses clustered around it. Families tied by kinship, covenant, tradition, and shared sacrifice. It resembles the dream Joseph Smith carried in his imagination. A community where faith, culture, and daily life are inseparable. And the influence of Polynesia on the worldwide church is far larger than its landmass. Their choirs shape the sound of modern Mormon music, powerful, reverent, emotional, and unmistakably Polynesian in harmony and soul. General conferences, temple dedications, and church broadcasts echo with island voices. Their missionaries travel the globe with a confidence and spiritual fire that mission presidents repeatedly describe as transformative. You can find them in Africa, Asia, Europe, South America, often serving as cultural bridges, bringing warmth and unity where divisions once existed. Their leaders serve in area presidencies, general bodies, and councils that help guide the worldwide church. Polynesian influence is already embedded at the executive level of global Mormonism, and their culture, communal, disciplined, reverent, family-centered, has quietly become one of the spiritual templates of modern Latter-day Saint life. Potlucks, choirs, youth camps, missionary culture, and even global church events increasingly reflect Polynesian warmth, emotion, and celebration. Yet for all this influence, the islands face one undeniable limitation. They are small, beautiful, powerful, devoted, but small. Their populations cannot anchor the demographic center of a religion with millions of members spread across continents. They cannot produce enough stakes, enough congregations, enough leadership depth to become the next global headquarters of Mormonism. But culturally, emotionally, spiritually, influentially, Polynesia is already one of the living hearts of the church, a place where the gospel feels natural, where Zion looks tangible, where devotion is instinctive, where testimony is sung, not spoken. The Polynesian Islands may never become the statistical center of Mormonism, but they remain one of its brightest spiritual centers, a beating heart helping power the global body of Zion. Chapter 7. India, the quiet dark horse. India barely shows up in global church statistics today. On paper, it looks insignificant, a footnote, a distant corner, a minor presence in a nation of more than 1 billion souls. But statistics lie, because numbers can only measure what currently exists, not what is waiting to explode. India holds what many scholars quietly call the single greatest spiritual opportunity of the 21st century. Start with the most powerful demographic reality on Earth. India has the world's largest youth population, tens of millions of young adults entering cities, universities, and professions every year. No other country offers a pool of potential Latter-day Saint, converts this young, this educated, this mobile, and this spiritually curious. Then consider its rapid transformation. Urbanization is accelerating. A massive middle class is emerging. Families are seeking stability, moral structure, education, and community. The precise pillars the church is uniquely built to provide. India is not a spiritually empty canvas. It is a spiritually crowded one. But crowded does not mean closed. It means searching. India is a land where religion is taken seriously. Devotion is generational, and spiritual commitment is part of daily identity. This aligns naturally with Mormon culture in ways many Western societies no longer do. Yet despite the enormous potential, the church remains cautious, extremely cautious. India's legal and cultural environment is delicate. Religious work is tightly watched. Proselytizing can trigger political tension. So the church's strategy is quiet, deliberate, almost invisible. Humanitarian programs expand, building trust with local communities. English language training grows, opening doors without confrontation. Digital missionary work operates silently. Thousands encountered online rather than in the streets. Small branches deepen rather than widen, forming close, loyal, resilient congregations that feel more like pioneer prayer circles than modern LDS wards. And that is precisely why India is the dark horse. It is not growing fast. It is growing deep. If the political or cultural barriers shift even slightly, a legal change, a generational opening, a new diplomatic window, India could transform from a whisper into a roar. Its youth population alone could ignite the fastest religious frontier Mormonism has ever seen. Its middle class could supply leadership for generations. Its cultural stability could anchor families in faith with uncommon dedication. India is not the present. Its numbers are small. Its branches are few. Its visibility is minimal. But the future rarely announces itself loudly. Sometimes it begins as a faint, quiet, unmeasured possibility on the edges of a global map. India is that possibility, the quiet, dark horse of Mormonism, waiting, growing, preparing, not the present, but very possibly the future. Chapter 8. The collapse of the American center. Utah will always be sacred, the refuge, the symbol, the birthplace of the modern church. The mountains, the desert, the valley carved by faith and endurance. These remain the spiritual architecture of Latter-day Saint identity. But symbols do not always reflect the present, and the numbers tell a quieter, more revealing truth. American Mormonism is aging. The once youthful surge of missionary culture has slowed. The wards that boomed with young families in the mid-20th century now echo with a demographic shift: more empty nests, fewer children, more gray hair in the pews. The growth curve that once made journalists declare Mormonism the next world religion has flattened. And in some areas, it has reversed. It is shrinking in influence, not in faith, not in conviction, but in cultural centrality. A church that once shaped American politics now finds its name invoked only in moments of controversy, confusion, or caricature. The prestige of being Utah-based no longer carries the global weight it once did. And in the corridors of American power, the Latter-day Saint voice, once unusually unified, has become quieter, fragmented, and uncertain. Its politics fracture its unity. No longer does one cultural script dominate Latter-day Saint life in the U.S. Generational divides, ideological divides, and regional divides now press against each other inside the same chapels. The same sacrament meeting can hold a conservative grandfather, a progressive granddaughter, and a middle-aged parent who does not know where they fit anymore. The cultural cohesion that once defined American Mormonism has thinned. Its culture no longer reflects the faith of its global members. The foods, the humor, the pioneer myths, the unwritten rules beloved in Utah do not travel cleanly to Nairobi, Sao Paulo, Manila, or Apia. The global church is young, multilingual, diverse, economically varied, and spiritually vibrant in ways that challenge American assumptions. For many members outside the U.S., the Utah template is simply not their story and never was. The spiritual energy that once radiated outward from Utah is now flowing inward from Latin America, from Africa, from Asia, and from the Pacific. Where American missionaries once arrived with confidence and cultural authority, they now return home humbled by the spiritual power they encountered abroad. In the global South, the testimonies burn brighter, the congregations grow faster, the callings are accepted with fiercer sacrifice, and the faith feels newer, less inherited, more chosen. For the first time since the pioneers entered the Salt Lake Valley, America may no longer be the beating heart of the church. The center of gravity is shifting, quietly, inevitably, historically, and the future of Latter-day Saint identity may be written in Spanish, in Portuguese, in Tagalog, in Twi, in Samoan, and in dozens of languages not yet heard in the conference center. The American center is not dying, but it is no longer singular, no longer dominant. no longer the axis around which the entire church revolves. A global church is emerging, and with it, a new story is beginning. Chapter 9. Local prophets, local culture, local Mormonism. The next Mormon nation will redefine what Mormonism looks like, not by rejecting its past, but by expanding its future. For almost 2 centuries, the faith carried the imprint of the American West pioneer pragmatism, frontier optimism, and Utah's cultural DNA. That identity shaped missions, leadership, traditions, and the unspoken rules of daily life. But the center of the church is no longer housed in a single culture, and the next chapter of the restoration will not speak only in English, nor think only in American frameworks. Utah's culture will not disappear, but it will no longer dominate. It will become one voice among many, one tradition in a global choir. Because a Filipino hymn, sung in perfect Tagalog harmony by a congregation gathered in a humid Manila chapel, carries a spiritual resonance that cannot be imported from Utah. A Nigerian fast Sunday, where testimonies erupt with spontaneous courage and raw, unfiltered faith, reveals a spiritual fire that Western Mormonism once had and may now rediscover through Africa. A Brazilian stake conference, full of drumming heartbeats, bright Sunday dresses, crowded hallways, and testimonies shaped by Catholic ancestry and Pentecostal energy, speaks a Mormonism born in joy, struggle, and relentless hope. A Samoan missionary farewell, overflowing with family, with tears, with laughter, with song, with an entire village packed shoulder to shoulder in a chapel built for far fewer people, shows a communal faith that transcends any American template. These will shape global Mormon identity, not as exceptions, not as curiosities, but as new centers of gravity. Future apostles and prophets may come from Manila, Sao Paulo, Accra, or New Delhi. They will not simply look different. They will teach differently. They will lead differently. They will see the world through spiritual lenses forged by histories unlike anything Utah has ever known. Their teachings will be shaped by their cultures, by the resilience of Pacific Islands battered by cyclones, by the faith of African Christians who worship with unbroken intensity, by the discipline of Southeast Asian converts who sacrifice in silence, by the vibrancy of Latin America, where every testimony feels like a dance between grief and gratitude. Their decisions will be shaped by their nations, by poverty or prosperity, by political instability or democratic strength, by the pressures of minority religions, and by cultural expectations that differ from anything the pioneers imagined. Their leadership will speak with accents, histories, and worldviews never before heard in Salt Lake City. They will see problems Utah cannot see. They will ask questions Utah never thought to ask. They will reveal the restoration in colors, idioms, and spiritual priorities that are not American but fully, gloriously Latter-day Saint. The next Mormon nation will not copy Utah. It will not mimic its social codes, its humor, its architecture, or its unwritten rules. It will not dress like Utah, vote like Utah, or think like Utah. Instead, it will transform the church into something larger, something older than America, something more global than ever imagined. Because the restoration was never meant to be a regional story. It was meant to be a worldwide one. And now, at last, the world is beginning to write its chapters. Chapter 10. Which nation leads the next century? Brazil has the numbers. A vast Latter-day Saint population scattered across megacities, jungles, coastal towns, and favelas. A nation where faith moves with the rhythm of music, where testimonies rise like heat off the asphalt, and where the church grows through warmth, community, and relentless optimism. Brazil does not just join Mormonism, it reshapes it through joy. If numbers matter, Brazil stands at the threshold of leadership. The Philippines has the soul. In the Philippines, the gospel is sung as much as it is preached. Faith there is emotional, communal, and overflowing with devotion. Every chapel feels like a home. Every prayer feels like a plea. Every testimony feels like a song. In Filipino Mormonism, suffering is met with resilience, and resilience is met with gratitude. If spiritual depth matters, the Philippines could become the church's heart. Nigeria has the zeal, bold, loud, unapologetic. Nigerian Latter-day Saints worship with a fire rarely seen in the Western Church. They fill chapels before dawn. They testify without restraint. They sacrifice without hesitation. Their faith is not inherited, it is earned, fought for, defended. In Nigeria, Mormonism is not a tradition. It is a revolution of the soul. If spiritual intensity matters, Nigeria could lead the next century. India has the future. Young, massive, technologically ascendant, a rising world power where ancient spirituality mixes with modern ambition. India sits at the crossroads of philosophy, faith, and global influence. Its people understand both suffering and aspiration, a dual wisdom the Church will need in the coming century. If the future belongs to those who shape global culture, India may one day anchor the restoration itself. Each possesses something the Church desperately needs. Brazil brings scale. The Philippines brings devotion. Nigeria brings fire. India brings trajectory. Each could become the new spiritual center of the faith. A center not defined by geography, but by vitality, sacrifice, and the sheer gravitational pull of their testimonies. Each could become the next Mormon nation. Not a replacement for Utah, but the next chapter in a story that was never meant to be bound to one culture or one continent. The question now is not if a new center will rise, but where, because demographic momentum is destiny. Spiritual momentum is destiny, and the restoration follows the people who carry it with the greatest faith. Which nation will become the next Zion? Zion is not a place. It is a people pure in heart, a people willing to bear one another's burdens, a people who turn their faith into action. Which people will carry the spiritual weight of the restoration into the next century? Will it be the warmth of Brazil, the devotion of the Philippines, the fire of Nigeria, the ambition of India? And what happens to Mormonism when the center of the faith shifts again? When prophets speak with new accents? When scripture is taught through new cultural metaphors? When the global South becomes the spiritual North Star? The restoration has moved before, from New York to Kirtland, from Kirtland to Nauvoo, from Nauvoo to the mountains of Utah. It will move again, and the next move may define the next 100 years. Chapter 11. The final criteria revelation. Throughout Latter-day Saint history, God, not population charts, not political power, not cultural prestige, has chosen the centers. His pattern is consistent. His logic is rarely predictable. Jerusalem, for the ancient saints, a city where prophets walked, where temples rose, where covenant identity took shape in the dust and heat of the Middle East. A place chosen not because it was safe or powerful, but because it was sacred. Kirtland, for the early restoration, a struggling frontier settlement, economically fragile, socially vulnerable, yet heaven opened there. Visions, angels, keys, covenants. The foundation of modern Mormonism was laid in a place no empire cared about. Nauvoo, for the gathering, a city built from swamp and persecution, where the saints learned unity, sacrifice, and the price of discipleship. It was a city chosen not for its geography, but for its refining fire. Winter quarters for the crossing, hard ground, frozen earth, makeshift homes, graves dug through ice. Yet it became a sacred pause in the unfolding restoration, a waypoint chosen by necessity and sanctified by faith. Salt Lake City, for the rebirth, a desert valley no one else desired, chosen because it was empty, isolated, and free from the mobs that sought the saints' destruction. Chosen because the pioneers asked God where to go, and He answered. The next center may not align with demography or politics. It may not be the country with the most saints, the fastest growth rate, or the strongest missionary tradition. It may emerge in a place scholars ignore, a city overlooked by the world, a nation dismissed by experts. Because revelation does not follow statistics. It interrupts them. It may be chosen through revelation, a divine shift that no statistician could predict, no sociologist could model, no political theorist could anticipate. A place prepared quietly over decades. A people refined through trials invisible to American eyes. A culture ready to hold a global faith, even if the world has not yet noticed. Somewhere on this planet, the next Mormon nation is already forming. maybe in the humidity of Southeast Asia, maybe in the crowded markets of West Africa, maybe in the islands of the Pacific, maybe in a megacity where millions move in spiritual hunger each day, quietly, in homes where scriptures are read by candlelight, in chapels built from sacrifice, not surplus, in testimonies whispered through persecution, in families who walk miles to church because they refuse to miss sacrament meeting, in youth who give their futures to missions their parents never imagined, steadily, growing in faith before it grows in numbers, growing in covenant before it grows in influence, growing in discipleship long before the world learns its name, inevitably, because God shapes the centers of His church, and He is shaping the next one now, beyond the borders of Utah, beyond the expectations of the Western world, beyond anything the pioneers could have foreseen. The restoration moves where revelation leads, and revelation, not geography, will choose the next Zion. The age of the American church is fading. The age of the global church is beginning. Somewhere perhaps in Manila, Lagos, Rio, or Delhi. The next Mormon nation is rising. And when it comes, the faith will never look the same again. If you want more deep dives into religion, history, and the mysterious evolution of faith across nations, subscribe to The Chronist, tap the like button, and share this video with someone ready to think differently about Mormonism's future.